Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern14.com here to talk about games that happened on Tuesday. We had some good ones. The best one came in Fayetteville in a packed Bud Walton Arena where Arkansas pulls out a win in overtime over Auburn, snapping a long winning streak for the Tigers. Blake, that one was about everything we had hoped it would be and just a real thrill to watch.
Yeah, great game. We said it could go either way. I think, as we talked about, it was kind of the perfect setup for Arkansas just because, this was a team that you kind of looked at and said they're playing so well. You've had an Auburn team that's had some interesting results on the road, as we've talked about, winning, by 1 at Missouri, 2 at Georgia. And, just overall, quite frankly, just hasn't played as well on the road. And, now you kind of have the setup of you're going into an environment that's just incredible. Bud Walton and all this other stuff, just an unbelievable atmosphere for that game. And it was just something to kind of watch and see. And yeah, I mean, I think you give a lot of credit to Arkansas here. I mean, I think, certainly Auburn had some missed opportunities and Zep Jasper not playing. I think that hurt them in terms of a lot of different things. Turnovers, I think they've turned it over now 33 times. 2 games he hasn't played here recently. And I thought their shot selection was questionable at times. I think you could say that for both teams. But I still think Arkansas, how they played was why this game was what it was. Sure, maybe Auburn believes, and they, they probably didn't play their best game, certainly some of their guys in particular, but I just think Arkansas made the plays, and JD Notae was fantastic. He's so fun to watch in terms of what he can do. But I still think it goes back to what I said going in. I thought the X factor would be one guy in particular, and I think Jalen Williams was that guy in terms of he just made some big plays. He just put himself in the right position, in just a couple different areas. And I know Auburn had 24 offensive rebounds, but I mean, that's also a team that, quite frankly, just as we said, that they've been good at being able to know where the ball is, and you have Walker Kessler that can get 8 of those. And I think those are just kind of those plays for a team that's very frustrated with their offense. Sometimes they just have to go get the ball. But I don't think that's, really an indictment on Jalen Williams. I think that he, yet again, was someone that, maybe he wasn't perfect in this one, but I just think having him on the floor and him being able to even grab 11 rebounds is important for this team. And yeah, I just thought Arkansas was really, really good for the majority of this game, and they deserved to win. So
it was so cool to see Bud Walton like that last night. It felt like it was the mid-'90s again, where just the place is electric and crazy. The fans rushed the floor, and JD Notae, you mentioned him. I just was so impressed. Sometimes there are guys whose contributions transcend the stats a little bit, and he had 28 points, but it wasn't just that. It was getting those big shots when you needed it and taking the leadership mantle. And I just thought he did everything the team needed him to do. I know the efficiency wasn't always there. He was 7 of 20 from the floor. But bottom line is you got to have a guy to make plays in those spots. And against a team like Auburn, it may not always be pretty, but he did what they needed.
Yep, he did. And, I mean, he's another one of those guys we've talked about all year long. If you don't have a trio of Sheboy, Smith, and Kessler, this guy's getting way more attention. I think it's the same with Tari Eason. I just think it's like, my goodness, you stack up these top 5, 6, 7 players in the SEC this year, and it's pretty remarkable to see kind of what you get out of these guys. I think one of the more interesting stats to me is like JD Notae had 4 blocks in this game. That is something, isn't it?
And he gets a lot of steals. I mean, his scoring gets talked about, but he's wasn't he leading the league in steals? Or I think he was a week or two ago.
It's like you think about the combination of him and Davis and their ability to pick up steals just with their quickness, and he's got great hands. And yeah, I mean, it's just like that guy doesn't just score 28 points. He had 4 blocks in this game, and I think there's something to that too. Just again, some of Auburn's shots, and we've kind of talked about that before. I said, hey, I think that's a little bit overblown, but
wasn't last night.
But without your point guard, I think it's, I think that's understandable probably to see more shots that are a little bit more questionable. But it certainly didn't help, that's for sure, because they did take some shots that even certainly the one at the end of regulation, I think we talked about quite a bit.
Yeah.
And you have to remember too, Auburn's up 5 with 2.5 to go in this game, and or whatever it was, 2 minutes left, and Arkansas made the plays down the stretch, and I think too, getting to the foul line. Auburn had I think 5 players for Auburn. Their starters all had 4 fouls or more. Kessler, of course, fouled out. So we said that was kind of the formula for Arkansas was they needed to get to the free throw line because it wasn't going to come via three. It was going to be hard to score, in the paint, knowing you have Kessler in there. So we said, they have to attack, they have to get to the free throw line, and they did a great job of that, 26 of 32. I'm sure, Auburn fans probably won't agree with all 32 of those free throws, but still, that's an important part. And on the flip side of that, right? Auburn goes 8 of 17 from the free throw line, and when
Ooh.
you shoot 47% on the road and you're in a close overtime game, those are ones you're going to look back and say, man, we really missed some opportunities there. And, the biggest ones are going to be the ones with Walker Kessler. He had some, chances to make a couple big ones down the stretch, and he just couldn't do it. So, yeah, big win for Arkansas. Certainly, there's takeaways for both teams, but I think you turn your focus here to Arkansas because they are, as we said, they're playing as well as anybody in the country right now. And if you're going to try to go in there and win, it's going to be a challenge at this point. And even when they're on the road now, they're starting to play so much better. And yeah, to me, that sort of cements it. They're your third best team in the league right now.
For sure. Well, I say for sure. I think Tennessee could have an argument. That's for another time. We won't engage that right now. Let's talk Auburn. Bruce Pearl after the game mentioned that, and I'm paraphrasing, so if I get this wrong, but I just was watching the SEC Network this morning and saw it once and didn't have a chance to go back and replay it. If I understood him correctly, he said we got to get contributions out of more than 3 people. So he was upset with some of the other guys on the team, I guess. KD Johnson didn't have his best night. I'm not going to point fingers here. Still, at the end of it, they still lost in overtime to Arkansas that's streaking. So whatever bones we want to pick, let's point that out. Wasn't Auburn's best night and still managed to get that close. But I felt like it was the 2 things that we were concerned about with them that came home to bite them, in addition to the foul shooting. And it was shot selection. We've talked about that. I didn't understand how, I believe there were 22 seconds left on the clock when they got the ball for the last possession. I don't know how that materializes in dribbling out the clock and settling for a 30-footer, but that's what they did. And then the other one was Kessler in foul trouble. He doesn't foul out in regulation. Maybe this one ends differently. It was regulation, right? I believe. Or was it overtime?
It's a blur to me.
Yeah.
I think the Jasper thing is so huge, especially in a game like this where you have an Arkansas team that's driven by its perimeter play. I just think it's such a hard thing to do, especially on the road. And again, we knew they had the issue of perhaps, shot selection at times, even before that. But now I think when you take away, one of the guys that kind of things sort of filter through on your offense, a lot of the time. And that's not, we know Wendell Green and KD Johnson, anyone can run the point essentially in terms of a guy bringing the ball down the floor. But I think when you have a guy like Jasper, that's kind of played the role he has. And it's not like we've said, it's not like he's someone that's had to score 15 a game or anything or, anything, but it's just having another person out there. I think they can kind of maybe be in that position to sort of calm things down a little bit, right? Because he is the older guy of the group. And I think that's as important as anything. We've got to remember still, Green, Johnson, they're still sophomores. Smith's a freshman. Kessler's a sophomore. So when you have someone like that that's older, that can at times maybe say, all right, hold on a second. Like, I've been down this road before. Like, let's do this instead of that. I think that's a big part of it. And again, that doesn't always show up on the stat sheet, but I think that's a significant, issue there, especially in these last 2 games in particular for them. Even at Georgia too. It's just, like I said, 33 turnovers in their last 2 games. And think about that, 33 turnovers in 2 games. That's a team that's 54th nationally and only turning it over about 11 times a game. So that's a big key. And, the Kessler thing, I think, just kind of anytime he's not on the floor, it's just a different game. And we've said that many times before. It's just completely different when he's not out there. So yeah, I mean, it was not Auburn's best performance, but I think a lot of that had to do with Arkansas and just being able to. I thought the biggest part of this game was for Arkansas just getting out to such a good start, and that was going to be to me the biggest part. Even though Auburn made its rally, I think you sort of expected it at one point, but Arkansas just getting out to such a good start. That's where these kind of games, I think, it's so significant because if you get out to sort of, a slow start, you don't have sort of that, maybe that enthusiasm, that energy, that confidence doesn't carry over. It could be hard because a team like Auburn's going to make a run, even if they're not playing at their best. They're always going to find a way to make a run to make it interesting. And I just thought Arkansas being able to, I think Auburn only had 15 points or something at the under 4 timeout in the first half, and it's just like that's the kind of start you needed to sort of fuel what you could do the rest of the way. And so yeah, I think it's just a huge win for Arkansas, and I'm it's exciting to see another team like this that's playing the way they are right now because, as we said, I mean after that game at A&M where they're 0-3 and losing 5 of 6, you're really starting to question a lot of things. And we just said, hey, this team is missing something. We don't know what it is. Even when they were 9-0, there was just something missing. Yeah. And now they figured it out, and they're understanding what they have to do to win. And that's good for the league because, again, now you've got another team that I think is certainly Sweet 16 good, maybe beyond that. It's not just Auburn and Kentucky. We're talking Auburn, Kentucky, Arkansas, Tennessee. Hey, we'll talk about LSU in a second. Can they get back there eventually? It's just, yeah, I think that's good, and it's certainly good for Arkansas because going in, I think they were, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 seed type range. I think now with the rest of the schedule, it's going to be tough. 3 of their next 4 on the road: Bama, Missouri, Florida, home against Tennessee. But I mean, they've got a really good chance to make up some ground here and really move up quite a bit in terms of those seed lines, and this is a big step towards that.
Yeah, I want to get to seeding implications in just a minute, but I wanted to hit Walker Kessler for a minute. I think our takes on his game last night were a little different. I thought he was unbelievable. And look, anytime somebody has 16 points, 19 rebounds, and 7 blocks, safe to say it was a good night. I saw him affecting shots that didn't go in the stat sheet. I know you felt like he maybe could have played a little better, maybe foul trouble played into that, but what did you make of the way he played?
Yeah, I mean, I by no means do I think he had a bad game, like you said. You're not going to say anyone had a bad game when they have 19 rebounds and 7 blocks, no matter how many points they have. No, I just think it's like, I mean, I don't even know if you even say, like, he could have played that much better. I think it's, I think part of it is, like, because you're in a position where you have to do that on every possession or else, right? Like, that's kind of what it felt like last night for them is, and it, you talked about kind of what the thinking of is you got to have more than 3 guys that contribute, especially in a game like that. I think it just, it does put a lot of pressure on him. And I think at times that can, I mean, like you said, I mean, that can lead to him having to do too much. And I know that can sound silly, but it's like you don't want to have to put a guy in that kind of situation where he has to do everything. And there were points in that game where it's, I mean, as I said, I'm looking up saying, I don't know how Auburn's in this game. But then I'm like, well, look, yeah, Jabari Smith's the leading scorer, but they're in this game because of him. And I mean, Walker Kessler's the reason. And it's just like, I think there's so many things that, look, I'm not saying, if you've watched our videos before, you know exactly. We've said this many times over the past month and a half, 2 months, whatever. Like, it's just, this guy does things that do not show up on the stat sheet, and yet he still fills the stat sheet. And it's like, no, I don't think he played bad at all. I didn't mean to say that if I did. Like, that's not, I think it's just sometimes there are situations where I feel like, you can't put so much on him to have to do that, especially on the defensive end, because, you can have some breakdowns, especially against a team like Arkansas that, as I mentioned, just have so many good guards. I mean, their guards are so quick. They're so athletic. They can get to the rim. And, I mean, there were some shots last night, I don't even remember who it was, but maybe it was Note, maybe it was Tony or some of these other guys, but they made some shots around him,
stepping
near him,
back
over. Yeah, it's just like, I mean, it was tough. Some of the shots they made were tough, and so again, give Arkansas credit for that. But No, I mean I guess the foul out portion. If you want to pick apart certain things, I mean, there, certainly he'd love to be on the floor more just because of that. But I think still overall, Auburn's not in this game without Walker Kessler, and I mean, that hasn't been all their games, but there's so many things he does. As we said, he's still take your pick on one of the top three players, put them in whatever order. I think Sheboy's still at the top, but put Kessler and Smith in whatever order you want to, because he just, the way he impacts the game is just on another level in college basketball. And yeah, I think it was just one where I'm sure he'd love to have a couple of those free throws back, as we talked about. That was a big difference in this one, but still, I mean, my goodness, it's like you just, in those kind of games, you need more help around someone like him. And they just didn't necessarily have enough of that, even though it's like, oh yeah, they didn't have enough of that, but they still only lost by 4 in overtime. So
I was having so much fun watching him last night. Bruce Pearl's rotations are carefully planned out. They like to rest guys, and there was a spell where he was on the bench because of that. And I just want to yell at the TV, I don't care about your rotations. I don't care about his foul trouble. Just put him back on the court, because I like watching him and seeing what he can do.
Yeah.
That's how much fun I have watching that guy play. But let's talk about seeding and implications. Auburn, I don't know how Auburn's not a 1 today if the field is picked, but you know where I'm going next, aren't you?
What's that?
Your favorite stat.
Oh, not the net.
Do you know where Auburn is in the net this morning?
I'll be completely honest with you. I have not checked the net one time this season. Not once.
Okay. Well, I do.
I'll check it in March.
Auburn dropped from 7 to 9 in the net with the road loss at Arkansas. Explain that one to me. I don't get it. Arkansas moves up from 37 to 31.
Arkansas would have moved up even if they had lost.
Yeah.
So that's like, that to me tells me what I need to know. So,
but it doesn't make sense. How does a road loss to a team that moves up by winning at home penalize you a couple of spots?
I'm not trying to explain it. Look, and I joke about not checking the net this season. I've checked it, but I was like, I don't put any sort of, again, these are the kind of things to me I know we have to look at, but I also know that I'm not on the committee that's choosing the teams and the seedings and all that. And I sometimes think that, it doesn't make sense. And we've been talking about this ever since the net was introduced. It's like, if Arkansas had lost that game last night, they still move up probably at least 4 spots. And it's just, I think it's just one of those things where I think the net's better than the dinosaur aged RPI.
Yeah.
But, like with all things, numbers can be flawed in terms of how it's built. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I think, again, it's when you win games, everything takes care of itself. And I mean, look, going into yesterday, Kentucky and Auburn were both number 1 seeds. I think Lenardi said last night if Kentucky won, which I know everyone has their opinions on Lenardi, but it's on ESPN. That's where we watch the games. It's the one you see the most. It is what it is. Probably, again, decide whoever you want in terms of your preferred bracketologist. But one of those things where Auburn loses, I think they're still, probably a number 1 seed, although I think, a lot of people probably looking for ways just to move them out. But I think Kentucky and Auburn right now are still right there. And yeah, I mean, Arkansas, the net, they move up, like you said. I think they're going to wind up settling probably in that 5 range is my guess. But, I mean, that's the thing with Arkansas. Someone asked me that a couple weeks ago. Arkansas has such a wide range because of their remaining schedule. I mean, it's like if they keep winning, if they win a lot of these games the rest of the way,
you could see Arkansas a 2 or a 3 if it goes right.
They can move up considerably. Like, they just have such a wide range because of, I think even at this point, like, unless then of course if they lose out or something, it's different. But I feel like 5 is probably like the lowest range for them at this point. Like, I think they are moving in such a direction that by the end of the season, if they keep playing like they're playing, I think they're no worse than a 5 seed. And like you said, maybe even a 3 or 4 based on how they finish here with a lot of tough opponents still to go. So
yeah, which is exactly what Arkansas did a year ago. It was like
right.
Went from the conversation to all this February and March momentum where you look up and they were a 2 last year, weren't they? Or were they a 3?
That feels like
one of the 2,
ago.
I think. But yeah, it really does.
Someone will tell us.
Okay, anything else on Auburn and Arkansas before we move on?
No,
Were you shocked that Kentucky struggled as much with South Carolina? I mean, in the end, Kentucky won comfortably, but that was a game with, I don't know, 10 minutes, 8 minutes left. Um,
I mean, I think I don't remember what I picked in this one. I mean, I know I picked
I don't
Kentucky to
either.
win, but
I don't think either of us
I don't
thought that
remember.
South Carolina was going to take them to,
No,
into to danger territory. Which I
no.
guess again in the end that's not how it happened. But
Yeah.
I know this. I'm focused on Auburn, and I look up at the TV and I'm like, oh wow, that's kind of been in the back of my head, and I didn't expect to see the score where it was when I saw it.
Nah, I think it's just one of those games where we said going in, as we always do, we try to point out both sides. I mean, we talked about it. South Carolina's just one of those teams that it just depends on the day, It's just, but I think going in, I always put some value into these ESPN primetime games. I know it's like, okay, every game's televised now, but like these are big games. Like these are, these are significant games for your program. These are significant games in terms of, more interest, especially anytime Kentucky comes to town. There's going to be more people in the building. And that was the case in that
Yeah.
one. There's a lot of Kentucky people there too, I'm sure. But
Yeah, let me stop you there. How does that happen? I mean, Columbia is a long way away from Lexington. How does Kentucky go
dude,
over and
Kentucky
take over a gym like that?
Kentucky could play tomorrow in Alaska, and they would have thousands of people there.
That's true.
It just is what it is. I mean, this is the expectation. When you have a tradition the way they have, they could play anywhere. Put them on Antarctica tomorrow. You're gonna
Yeah.
have at least 1,000 there. I guarantee you. So, I mean, it's just, yeah. I mean, I think that's how it always goes with Kentucky. And I mean, it's easier to get into some buildings than others in terms of fan support for the home team. But I mean, look, this one was Kentucky was still up like 15 or something, I think, with 8 minutes left. And I know it got close at times, but to me, this is always a situation of a team that's just they feel comfortable. Like there was never a point, even when this game was tied, like in the second half. There's never a point where I'm thinking South Carolina is going to win this game. I think that's maybe what Kentucky's thinking is like we're going to win this game. Maybe it's not as pretty as everyone wanted it to be at times, but maybe we don't win by as many as people think. But we're going to win this game, and that's what it looked like to me out there. I mean, this was just they had six guys in double figures. Great balanced performance. Oscar Sheboy still doing his thing. This is on the road in the SEC. I don't chalk it up to anything more than that. I don't take anything away from South Carolina because how do you take anything away? I mean, they played well at times. Keyshawn Bryant played well. Kuznard played well. The two guys we talked about coming into the season, they needed to be the guys that carried them. Hasn't been consistently that way, but they played well in this one. Stepped up in a big game, but never did I think Kentucky was in danger here. I think that this was another scenario of they're too good, they're too balanced, they got too many options, and I mean it's just like Collins, right? Remember we talked about Collins, where it's like he
Yeah.
stepped up,
Didn't
played,
need to last night.
played 3 minutes, and it's like it's just I mean they got so many options, and yet they like I said they still had six guys in double figures. Severe Wheeler was not one of them. So
Yeah.
I mean it's just Kentucky is look, I think you can, and I know a lot of people have talked about it. You can compare Kentucky and Auburn at this point all you want. Um, but look, Kentucky's good enough to win the national championship. They're that good, and I don't. There's nothing in this game that made me change my mind on that. I think that this was just a road game in the SEC, prime time, ESPN. South Carolina stepped up, but yet it was still not enough, and it still resulted in a double-digit loss.
The thing that struck me when I watched Kentucky last night is just how hard they are to guard because everybody can score. I don't think there's another team in this league where you could get 10 to 12 points a night, any given night, decent chance of it happening. I don't think you can say that more of any team in this league than you can Kentucky. Does that make sense?
No, I understand what you're saying. I mean, it is. It's just incredible to watch them play. And I mean, look, we go back to our conversations we had to start the season. We said, I ended up defaulting back to saying I think Kentucky's going to win the league, and it was because we thought that they were just going to be so much better offensively. I mean, you were going to get defensively, but you just thought, okay, they're going to have so many more options offensively now, and it feels like the kind of team that everyone can just kind of mesh together and it's always hard to predict chemistry, but this felt like a team where once they got it and you could start to see it coming in place, you're like, okay, like here they go. And this is what they've been doing. I know everyone can still look back to the game against Auburn and what happens if they're at full strength and all that, but my guess is there's a good chance we get that game again this season. Maybe it's in the
Oh, I
SEC
think we
tournament.
will.
Maybe it's a rematch in the NCAA tournament several years ago. Who knows? But I think there's a good chance we get that game again. But when you watch Kentucky play, all those answers we had about them playing on the road, throw them out the window at this point. They've been quite. I mean, at times, like they have been fantastic in their last three road games specifically. Of course, the Kansas one stands out the most, but I think even winning at Alabama the way they did, to hold that team to 55 points, and now to go on the road and maybe at times you're just thinking, all right, they're just trying to get through this game, and if they still win by 10, they're fantastic. Yeah, that they're good enough to win it all, and I think that they got a fun stretch coming up here too. They got Florida next at home. They got to go to Tennessee, but then they get Alabama and LSU at home. Then they go to Arkansas. Man, you think about that, right? Like, what if Arkansas and Kentucky are just completely still rolling at that point come February
Yeah.
26th? If you think that atmosphere last night was huge, wait till Kentucky comes to town in that game that could, be even bigger at that point. So it's yeah, that's another one that I'm sure Arkansas fans are excited about if both teams continue their path here.
Yeah, that one you circle is the most likely where a fist fight might break out in the stands for that one.
I don't know how many Kentucky fans are getting into Bud Walton. That's for sure.
They have their way, man.
That's gonna be a harder one to get into, though. I'll tell
It
you that.
is. Maybe the fist
We'll
fights
see.
break out outside then. So
Yeah, we'll see.
No, all kidding aside, and I may be transposing comments here, but I think the way that John Calipari said this in his post game interview on TV was interesting, and I think it was prompted by the question about Xavier Wheeler, and I think he's 0 for his last 19, and he pointed out, well, he got 11 assists, and everybody's got their thing on this team, and that's his thing. And that's what we do so well, is the way I interpret it. And he's nailed it. I mean, I'll give you an example, okay? Kellen Grady on a lot of teams, I think, would be getting 21, 22 points a night. He seems to be more of a 8, 9 to 15 point a guy night. I mean, like, I don't think that there's been a game without looking that Grady went off for 28 or 30 or whatever he probably did at Davidson. But that's knowing your role and having other guys who can do things and letting the game come to you. And you look at his efficiency numbers, they've been so good. I just thought between watching the way it played out with the scoring load and listening to Calipari's comment afterwards on that, I just thought that explains these guys perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, with Wheeler, you could argue that some of Kentucky's best games this season. That's Kansas, yeah, I'm sure there are others. I mean, look, he scored 21 against Tennessee. Who didn't score against Tennessee?
Right.
Same against North Carolina. He scored 26 against North Carolina, but who didn't score against North Carolina? But even some of their other better games, like the Kansas one, he only had 7 points. As we said, I mean, I thought they just, I know score wise, like 66-55. Some people are going to say that, but like I just thought they played so well at Alabama, and he didn't even score in that game. And yet it's still he's such a big part of what they do. And so yeah, I mean it's they have defined their roles, and a lot of teams that struggle because they don't define their roles. Their guys can never figure out who's going to be what and accept that. And we've seen that before at Kentucky, right? We always talk about it, where you have everybody comes in as a 5-star, and everyone wants to be the guy. But Cal's best teams are when guys accept where they need to be in the rotation, what their job is, and that's much harder. And I've always everyone has their opinion about Calipari, but I've always said he does not get enough credit for that. The ability to take that many guys who come in wanting to be the top dog
Yeah.
and somehow find a way to put them together to where everyone's not going out, trying to shoot 50 times a game. It's hard to do. And that's not a knock on the kids. That's what you expect when you come into a program like that and you've accomplished what you've accomplished in high school, or anywhere else. It's just like that's your expectation. You want to be the best on the best, and that's what you when you come into Kentucky, like I'm sure it's in the back of your mind. Hey, I could be the best player on the best team in the country potentially. But for everyone to kind of accept their role and to understand what they need to do, those are the teams that go the furthest. And that's why I think this Kentucky team is as good as they are, is because Wheeler doesn't have to step on the floor and do what he did at Georgia. He doesn't have to shoot 25 times a game for them to be in a game. And he understands that. He doesn't have to play that role anymore. And it's the same for these other guys, like Grady. He was the guy at Davidson. He doesn't have to be the guy on the floor every single time in this game. He doesn't have to shoot 15, 20 times. And so I think that's such a huge part of their success. And like I said, I don't think Calipari gets enough credit for that, because that's a hard job to put everybody in that position. So
We talked about Kentucky the other day, and I really just stammered through an answer or a statement and just really botched it the other day. And now that I've had some time to think about what it was I was saying, I think what I was trying to say is it's the best team since the 2012 team, and then just blattered on for a bit. But anyway.
yeah, we do a lot of that.
We do. That's what we're here for, to blather. But I think it just has occurred to me what I was getting at. I go back to the 2012 team that won it all with Anthony Davis. And I don't know that Sheboy's Davis, but he's darn good and maybe National Player of the Year material. But, that team, it was the same thing, right? It was an older team. Everybody knew their roles. The chemistry was good. The kids seemed likable. And it just had that air about it. And throw the comparisons of who's been better since out the window. I think that's the sentiment that I'm getting at, is it has that feel and how it's constructed with roles and buy-in and all those things. And I guess that's just reiterating what you just said, but when I watched him, I think that's the reason that just every game I feel like, that may be the team that I would pick right now to cut the nets down at the end, just because it just has that feel all over again.
Yeah, it's a great team versus great individuals. That's the difference, is because they're all great individual players, but it's much different to take great individual players and put it into a great team versus just staying the same and putting those great individual players on the floor and just letting it go where it goes. And I think that's where the difference has been for this one, is it all has come together the way they've needed it to. Everyone does something a little bit different and has a skill that's a little bit better than maybe someone else, and they embrace that. And that's why this team is so fun to watch, and that's why they've had the success they've had to this point.
My one little concern coming out of that game is Jacob Toppin, who was great when he played, 10 points in 6 minutes, I think, left the game with, I think, a sprained ankle, which I think was the issue that popped up with him a couple of weeks ago. You've had Damian Collins, who hasn't played a lot this season, but he's been sidelined with injury issues too. Is there a little concern in terms of health coming out of this game with a couple of your bigs either hobbled or having been hobbled really recently? I mean, I guess that's a question we don't know the answer, but I'm just going to throw that out there maybe as something to watch is a better way to say it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely something to watch. Anytime you have a player of that importance go down with an injury, it's just a matter of, okay, how does it play out from here? And, for some reason he's out for an extended amount of time. Well, yeah, you probably reset certain expectations about, certain areas of the game, just because he is someone that is, kind of sporadically played 15 plus minutes here and there. And so, yeah, I mean, it's another big body out there. And, that's where I think defensively, that's why they're so hard to score against, is you just have someone else like that out there that 6'9", 200, whatever he is. I mean, it's just, there's another one out there, and it's like you've already got Sheboy to deal with. So, yeah, I mean, it's something to monitor, because that just, if he's out for an extended amount of time or something, that takes one of your big, depth pieces away. But, it remains to be seen, I guess.
Anything else on that one before we move on to LSU and A&M?
Nope.
Okay, LSU answered the bell last night, quickly and decisively.
Yeah, this is what you wanted to see from LSU. I mean, as we said going in, good luck for anyone that tried to predict how this game was going to play out based on where these two teams had been. But this is exactly what you wanted if you were, like myself, and really starting to question LSU. You needed to see the start that they got off to in this one, and they were just dominant in the first half. And, I mean, that's what you want, right? You just want a team that comes out and just kind of punches you in the mouth and and just does it the way they did it. I know once again, it's kind of the same scenario where A&M kind of rallies and makes it interesting, but still, this was a game that LSU was in control of. I thought pretty much the entire way. Again, I know LSU or A&M made it close later, but give credit, man. I think to Tari Eason,
Oh
he has
yeah,
really stepped up, and even the issues we had with LSU before, we never really mentioned Eason because he was not the problem. We talked about it. He was never really the issue, and I think the good news here is Xavier Pinson is back on the floor for not just 10, 15 minutes. Like he's back on the floor for 25 minutes in this game, and I've said this before too. Like I know there's some people who, if you don't watch LSU every game, you're gonna look up and say, "Man, Pinson's turned the ball over quite a bit. He's got maybe 4 turnovers in a lot of games this year, or more, 6 in the one last night." But it's just having him out
the
there is
presence.
so.
Yeah,
Yes, it's just so much different. I think when you watch them play, and it's not that he's has to be an All SEC player. I think it's just having him on the floor. Period. It just gives you someone else who kind of understands where the ball needs to be at times and where it needs to go offensively. And it's not like he has to take every shot, but it's just he kind of understands where things need to head. And I think that's where having another guy like that out there, and look, the chemistry was so well too. I think you can't undervalue that. Is their chemistry was so good early in the season, and they kind of figured out what everybody needed to do. It's not unlike what we talked about with Kentucky. Everybody kind of understood their role and where they needed to be. I think Pinson understood there may be times where he needs to be a high volume scorer, but not really as much anymore because Eason's kind of taken on that role, and he doesn't have to be that. So I think it's just everyone understanding their role. Now you got him back. I think if he is back and good to go now, look, that's the first time he's played, 20 or more than 16 minutes because he, played those 2 games and then didn't play against Vanderbilt. That's the first time he's played, 25 minutes in a month. And so that I think is going to be huge for this team moving forward. As we said, that was really a must win for LSU. Felt like a must win for A&M, although we kind of remove our expectations from them now. But
yeah,
yeah, I think this was way more about LSU. They're the talking point here, and this was a game they had to win, and they did it.
yeah. It's just another night in the SEC when Tari Eason goes 25 and 12, 3 blocks, 3 steals, and is kind of a footnote on the night. That's how good the league and its players are. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that one, and I didn't get to watch much of it because obviously Auburn and Kentucky were on at the time, and I do the 2 TV thing. But when Carolina made it interesting with Kentucky for a while, that's where my eyes went on the second one. So
I had to
this
go
was,
back and peruse this one. This was yeah.
yeah, this
This
was
was as
that,
good though. You just gotta
yeah.
watch the first half, and you'd have got the picture of where this thing was going to head for LSU.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I was going to say LSU was kind of a victim of bad timing in terms of our show prep, but A&M, I mean, they're not going to win at Auburn coming up next. I think it's either run the table in the rest of the SEC or win all but 1 or 2 of them and have to beat a couple of the right teams in the NCAA tournament at this point, which is not what I think I thought of them a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, not much to say on A&M. I mean, we predicted a 4-0 start, and then it's like we said, well, we're going to predict that you could start 4-0, but the wheels could come off pretty quick after that, and that's what's happened. I mean, it's just it's funny though to think about, isn't it? They lost that game by 8 last night. Like this team is one of those teams. Like it does not matter how one side of the game is at one point. They're going to find a way to get that thing down to 10 or less. And they did that again here. I mean, really, they've lost what, 7 in a row now? They're
Yeah.
still all by 10 points or less. Like it's not like maybe there are periods like last night where they're getting blown out at one point, but it's just like that final score line is going to wind up being 10 or less. So I don't think that means anything anymore because you have to win some of those at some point. But yeah, I think A&M is until they win a game of substance or win a game period. There's not a whole lot to say about them because they got a big challenge coming up at Auburn. So
Have you ever in your life seen an NCAA team follow an 8-game winning streak with an 8-game losing streak? Because that's what's going to happen when they lose at Auburn on Saturday.
yeah, that's just it's not happening. So
Yeah.
I mean, I don't. Crazy things have happened in the SEC. I think Auburn probably bounces back in a pretty mean way. I think they're going to come out a little angry, perhaps. But yeah, I think it's just one of those things where A&M's kind of settled into that spot where we probably thought they'd be going into the season. They just happened to raise expectations after that 4-0 start. So
I watch them and I have a little disconnect between what my eyes tell me and what we're seeing. I watch them. I think they're really good. I think they're kind of fun to watch most nights. I think they're talented. They're athletic. They got some depth. Maybe it's just, and maybe this is not watching enough to really see what it is. Maybe it's a case of these guys are almost all new, and maybe for some reason the pieces just don't mesh. But I like their talent, Blake. I do.
yeah, I
It's
mean,
and,
it's
and
like
it's tough here in the league, but I watch them. I think this is a pretty decent team.
it kind of goes back to what I said about LSU on the flip side of this, and you wanted to see LSU win this game in the way they won it. I know the points wound up being 8, but you wanted to see them bounce back and show that they could, be up 20 on a team like this on the road and be that impressive. It's the flip with A&M. Yeah, they're 4-7. They've lost 7 in a row, but you go back to those 4 games they won. They beat Georgia on the road by 2, beat Missouri on the road by 3, which I know Auburn, same situation, right? But still, to me, it's like point me in the direction somewhere of this A&M team just being good enough to, you know what I mean? Like just
Yeah.
to run someone off the floor that's good. And I just don't like there's nowhere on their schedule that I see that this season. And even yeah, like they've beaten Dallas Christian and Central Arkansas and those teams like that convincingly. But, it's just like I think that they are a team that would be great if this was a 60 game season, right? Because it's like
Mm-hmm.
you'd have a lot more games to maybe get on the same page and you'd win some of those closer games that maybe you've lost here at this stretch. So, by the way, I said they lost by 10 or less, 11. They lost by 11 at home to South Carolina. So 11 is the number or less. But yeah, I just think I haven't really seen that. They're a solid team, but I think anything stronger than that at this point, they haven't really shown it against good or bad competition at the power conference level. To be able to pull off some of these just dominant wins like we've seen again from maybe some of these upper tier teams in the SEC.
All right. Don't want to make too much of beating Missouri on their home floor, but as we've said many a time, any team in this league can get you any night, any place. It's almost to that point this year with the way the results have gone down. Vandy had a take care of business night against Missouri. Wasn't always pretty. Vanderbilt trailed, I think, with 6 minutes left by maybe a point. But Vandy put 5 guys in double figures. Quentin Millora-Brown gives them a double-double. This is kind of the whole thing of, like with Kentucky, on a much different level of knowing your role and doing it. And that's kind of what Vandy is right now. And one surprise, well, I guess it's not a surprise. Liam Robbins played 11 minutes for them last night. Goodness. I could have sworn he had some blocks. Yeah, he had 4 of them, I think.
Yeah,
Made a big difference. I can't read box scores anymore. They've changed,
a
and it's
lot of
hard to
stuff in
find
there.
where stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here. That accounts for the confused look on my face as I'm doing this. But had an impact down low. His backup, Quentin Millora-Brown, or I guess the starter at this point, again, really solid. Rodney Chapman, we've talked about his importance. He was pretty good last night. Not great, but good. And Vandy's sitting here 13-10, and I think the 13 is their biggest win total since in 5 years, which is crazy to say, but another step for the Commodores last night.
Yep, we thought this was a good spot for them, and they took care of business. I mean, the interesting thing is like you can't be good in the SEC unless you win your home games. Like because it's otherwise you put too much pressure on yourself on the road, right? And we know how hard it is to win on the road. So you have to take care of business in your home games, and that's what we had been saying. It's like if they can't find a way to win some of these home games, which has kind of switched now, where you have fans back in, it's more of a home environment. And now look up, and they've won 3 in a row at home, and so that's what you have to do. Like that's just how it works in this league. If you want to be able to rise up the ladder, if you want to, do what Vanderbilt has been wanting to do for years now, to get back to where they were. We've talked about this so many times before. One of the reasons Vanderbilt had so much success in the SEC year in year out is not that they were necessarily the best team, but they were always the team, I'd say probably top 3 that you could count on to win their games at home and to take advantage of their home court advantage. And like that was just something where they would pull off some of those wins you didn't think they'd ever win, right? Because maybe they weren't as good as the other team, but they could win their games at home, and that's how you have to do it in this league. You cannot afford to have to go out and say, "All right, we have to go win 5 road games in the SEC." That's just too hard. Like that's a tough ask for anyone. I mean, as we're seeing, right? Look at the best teams. Like even some of these teams struggle on the road. So now they've won 3 in a row at home. So now you're able to kind of, move in the right direction just because you're taking care of your business in your own gym. And I think that's what's important here for them because, they're still going to be probably up and down on the road. But now they're winning these games that they need to win to move in the right direction. And this was another one. I thought, really, I thought both teams played well here. I know Missouri missed some shots, but I think this was actually a pretty good game overall. Just in terms of these two teams, I thought they played well. Again, I think for Missouri, they're still a team that you can see it like they're getting better. And I just thought Vanderbilt made more plays in this game, and they were in a position where hey they just were able to have a good night from Scottie Pippen, which like you said there was a good chance he was not going to bounce back and only have 7 points, back-to-back games or anything, but you get a little production from everywhere. This is the theme we talked about with Vanderbilt. It can't just be one guy, can't be 2 guys. You got to have a little bit of something from everyone. And now that maybe they are at full strength, even though Robbins only plays 11 minutes, now that you've got your core there, maybe this team can meet that spot where we thought they could get. We said, hey, maybe the ceiling for this team is 8th in the SEC, but you know what? That's good enough to either be a high level NIT team or a bubble NCAA tournament team. And I'm not saying they're going to get there, but they're playing like it, like they're starting to play that way. And I think that's very encouraging. So
hypothetical here. Okay. Next 4 games, Tennessee on the road, Auburn on the road, A&M at home, Alabama at home. Hypothetical. Vandy gets 3 of those 4. I think Auburn's the one that's just not going to happen. But let's say they get Tennessee and Knoxville, which I don't think is going to happen. But just for argument's sake, you pad with a couple more wins at home. Alabama's a move the needle win. Then all of a sudden you've got 5 really big wins on your resume. At that point, they would be 16-11. And they would be 8-8 in the league, 8-7 in the league.
Yeah, 8-7.
I have to think they are set up at that point for a make it or break it at Mississippi State, Florida at home, Ole Miss away chance with another round or 2 in the NCAA tournament. I mean, we're bringing up a hypothetical that's probably not going to happen, and also depends on what other teams are doing. But point is, I think it's in the universe of possibility. Although the 82 net right now is an issue for them, but it's going to get better. You bag a couple of those. It's the big wins. Once you start getting big wins, if the other stuff falls into place, that's when you put yourself in position. They bag some of those now. And again, don't like your chances to do it, but we've seen crazier stuff happen than for a team to pull 3 or 4 in a situation like that, given who they've got and where those games are.
Yeah, it gets more interesting. The only issue for Vanderbilt is the teams they've beaten are starting to head in the wrong direction. BYU, for example, they've lost 4 in a row now. Arkansas is heading in the right direction. That's an example. I mean, LSU seed-wise is heading in the wrong direction, right? Because that win against A&M doesn't do anything for them. They've dropped from being potentially a 3 or 4 seed down to probably like a 6 or 7 right now, just based on this trend. So that's where, if you're Vanderbilt, you're rooting for Arkansas's continued success. I'm not sure BYU is going to be able to turn it around at this point. So that win looks less impressive. And then the only other thing, again, Arkansas and LSU are the only wins you have to speak of. So if you're able to beat an Alabama and a Tennessee for, because again, winning at Auburn probably going to be a tough challenge, then it's like, all right, now we add a couple more wins. Now things start to get interesting. I still don't think they're on that level radar, maybe even at
Yeah.
that point. I think they need more than that, even to get into the, next four out conversation. So yeah, they got a lot of ground still to make up here, but I still think, hey, if they can, I think it's going to be a challenge. Like we said, if they can get to 500 in the league, if they can finish the league 500, why that would be significant is because of who they have left to play. Because they still have Tennessee, Auburn, Alabama, Mississippi State, Florida. Those five are still on their schedule. So to get to 500, that means you have to, win 4 of those games? So if you're able to do that, even if Texas A&M and Ole Miss are 2 of those, if you can beat 2 of those other, 5 or whatever, and get to 500, let's say, then I think you at least have a chance going into the SEC tournament. But ultimately, I think that it's going to be that this conversation is just for fun because I think winning a lot of those games is going to be a challenge for this team. But I say that I think that this is just a team that's got a lot of confidence right now, and I can't say I'd be surprised at all if they were to go on the road and beat. I don't think it's going to be Auburn, but if they were to win at Tennessee, Tennessee has one of those offensive games. Maybe you win at Mississippi State, although they play a lot better at home. I don't know. It's possible. And Alabama never seems to play well at Memorial, so there's opportunities. I just think it's going to take a lot, I think, to get back in that picture.
Well, they haven't really been blown out in a while, other than the Kentucky game, which was a blowout, even though the score was closer, the one in Nashville. Again, the only reason I bring this up is because they're in an unusual position where teams in their stratosphere usually don't have the wins that they've got, and BYU was neutral, Arkansas was on the road, which factors in too. If you're handicapping their chances, and again, it's a different team when you've got Chapman and Robbins back, which they do now. If you handicap their chances to where they're in the field, what kind of percentage do you put on? I've got a number in mind. I just want to see what yours is.
Not good with the percentages.
Yeah.
Probably 15.
Yeah, I was thinking 5 to 10. Again, it's not great, but it's always fun to just bring up these little kind of off the radar of everybody's mind
and especially
possibilities.
It's a team that's playing better. When it's a team that's playing better, they're starting to teeter on that line of, okay, I can see a path there.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of teams you can't see a path there anymore. And, but they happen to be one of the teams now that I see a better path for them than A&M. It's like I see a better path for them than A&M or South Carolina or Ole Miss or Missouri or Georgia. And so, okay, you're moving up that ladder now. You got a better record as of us recording this than Alabama in the league. So it's like, there's possibilities for sure. So,
well, and that's a program that needs something to cheer about. If you had said 10 years ago, Vandy's going to be in a spot where they win 12 or less for 4 straight years, go winless in the league one year, finish last 3 years. Nobody would have thought that would have happened.
Yeah.
And then you throw in, what the football team's got a 20-game conference losing streak. It has just been brutal for those fans. Now you have baseball, which is pretty good in its own right. But some fans don't care about that. And basketball's always been the point of pride. Going back 60 years with that school.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say is like, and even with all the success with baseball, like numbers wise, there's a difference in football to basketball to it's just in terms of that. Like we know just in terms of like what the numbers are, but it's also the tradition part of it where, like we said, basketball has always really been the thing that, that's where I'm sure a lot of people that became Vanderbilt fans got hooked through basketball. And, that's just, it's like that first thing that gets you hooked and you want to see that have success. And it just hasn't been there for a little while. So this is a I don't know if it's a big step in the right direction, but I think it's at least significant step in the right direction because like they have gotten better every year. Like I've mentioned, it's just can they take that next step? This year is probably the year to do it, I would think, based on your roster. But you've at least set yourself up for that opportunity, and you couldn't have said that the last several years. So,
Parting thoughts.
nope. Another interesting Saturday slate, which we will discuss. But yeah, I mean, look, we're almost in mid-February here, so this is where you got to start winning some games. And if you're these teams, trying to either improve your seeding, get into the tournament, so every game gets big from here on out.
Thanks for watching and listening. Remember to subscribe if you can. If you're watching these, you like them, that helps us out a ton. Tell a friend. If you like baseball, I've been teasing that for about a week now. I think we're going to get our first baseball video out on Thursday night. We're going to preview the SEC West. We're going to have a special guest. I'm pretty excited about that. I'll just leave it there until we do it. But anyway, thanks for watching. We will be back on Thursday morning to talk about games of Wednesday night, and we'll see you then.